Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones for Game Boy Advance. This is actually the 8th game in the Fire Emblem franchise, but only the 2nd to be released outside Japan. The first being Fire Emblem 7, which was a prequel to Fire Emblem 6 of all things. And they actually made it so that you didn't have to have played Fire Emblem 6 so you could understand Fire Emblem 7, but it was weird. So the 7th was the West's first real introduction to the series. And when they went to Fire Emblem 8, it doesn't have anything to do with Fire Emblem in terms of, well, the previous Fire Emblem games, in terms of the story or the setting. It's in a completely different setting, completely different storyline. But it has the same gameplay elements, and it's known for the same things that the rest of the series is known for. It was criticized, however, for being pretty much too similar to the previous game, which is kind of weird, but oh well. So the question becomes, is it any good? Well, the presentation isn't really lacking, but nor is it really that impressive. It is limited greatly by the hardware, which, I mean, it's the Game Boy Advance. You expect it to be 2D sprites and those kind of animations and such. And what it does with those is really well done. The faces look very nice in the conversations, in the menus and such. The battle animations are pretty nice. Some of them are a little too simple for their own good, but they're surprisingly well detailed. The tactical map itself, though, is a little bit lacking. Environments just don't look as good as some of the other stuff in the game. It kind of pulls away from it just a little bit. It's not really that noticeable, but you look at the environment and you're kind of like, this could look a little better. But that said, the visuals do their job fairly well, and that's really what they're meant to do. And there's little touches here and there that are really nice, like when you're in the middle of conversations, the characters' mouths when they're talking, they actually move, and it moves along with the text, so that's kind of cool. But overall, the visuals really aren't that impressive. Likewise, the sound design is also limited by the hardware. The Game Boy Advance does not have particularly good sound processing, so you end up having a lot of really old school kind of sound effects. It's all very simple. There's no like massive amounts of high quality sound effects or anything. It's mostly bleeps and bloops and kind of scratchy noises. There's really not that much else. And you can tell what's going on. You can tell different hits apart and stuff like that. But it's really not that noticeable. I mean, there's no voice acting. Music is decent. I wasn't really a big fan of it, though. It did kind of just get on my nerves after a while, because it tends to repeat over and over and over and over and over again. It's really short loops. And eventually it just bothered me to the point where I'm like, whatever, I'll just turn the music off. And that's where I just kind of turned the volume off, and it really didn't detract from the experience. So you can play it with or without the audio, and it really doesn't matter. So I mean, I know a lot of people like the music, and it's not bad music, like I said, it just gets on my nerves when it's on endless loop, so yeah. But overall, presentation, not particularly impressive. But what really matters most in this game is actually the story, the characters, and the gameplay. Now, the story is fairly simple. You play as the Lords Ephraim, and I believe her name is pronounced Erica, but I'm not exactly sure on that, don't hold me to it. But you play as these two twins who are the Prince and Princess of Renai, or Renee, however you say it. I'm not exactly sure on that. No voice acting in the game, so bear with me. But basically, their homeland is invaded. They have to escape, and they kind of have to find out why this is happening, how to stop it, and then go off and do their own things. And it picks up more towards the middle of the storyline, which is several chapters in. I mean, we're talking like 8 or so chapters in, it really starts to pick up. So it's off to a pretty shaky start, but then it picks up, and it gets better, but at the same time, it has a lot of moments where you're just kind of like, wait, what? The story kind of goes all over the place at some points. Some things that are introduced really aren't explained that well. And that ends up being a little bit problematic, but it's not too bad. But really the series' high point is its characters. It's well known for having really, really well-developed characters. And Sacred Stones is no exception. It does have that. you really get attached to these characters as you increase their experience. I mean, you go and fight with them. You do support conversations with other characters to build their relationships, as well as give them bonuses here and there. And that's all cool. So you get attached to these characters, and that's where they have been fiendishly clever, because when a character dies in this game, they die permanently. And I mean, if you lose Ephraim or Erica or both of them, then game over. If you lose any of the other characters, you lose them permanently. So it's basically don't screw up. And so you get this kind of drive to be a perfectionist almost. You kind of feel like you have to beat these levels without losing a single person. And that's a lot easier said than done. This is a tactical RPG. You don't really have a lot of games like this, so it's really kind of hard to practice unless you play a lot of Fire Emblem. And given that this is the second game in the series that was released outside of Japan, it's kind of hard for us Westerners to really get used to it, obviously. And if you think you can play, say, Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn and come to this one, they actually feel completely different, and they really have a very different approach to the way they're played. Even between Fire Emblem 7 and 8, while the gameplay is pretty much the same, they do feel radically different. So it's kind of weird to sit there and play both of these and the other Fire Emblem games as well, because you sit there and you notice, while the gameplay is pretty much the same, they all feel radically different in terms of just, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, I guess. But this game can get brutally difficult at times, and you'll sit there and you'll lose characters over and over and over again until eventually you finally manage to pass through the level without actually losing people, and that's a great feeling. But it does have the strategic elements that you kind of expect from a tactics game. You have 3 different types of weapons: swords, lances, and axes. Swords are good against axes, axes are good against lances, and lances are good against swords. So you'll end up doing a lot of positioning with different characters who have different weapons, sending them in to attack certain characters that have inferior weapons, so on and so forth. And this is where it can get pretty hectic, because if you position a unit wrong, then you're going to probably take either a lot of damage or you're going to lose that unit, and you have to be really careful with what you're doing. Characters will level up as you go along. They gain experience by taking out enemies. And when they reach 100 experience points, they level up. And when they level up, they get different bonuses to their stats, up to level 20, which is the maximum level they can have at any given tier. When you reach level 20, you don't have to be level 20. You can be at level 10 and actually do this, but if you're level 20, you'll get the most bonus. You can actually change your character's class. And, like, say you choose to upgrade Erica. She will go from a Lord to a Great Lord. And this is the standard Fire Emblem thing. I mean, it's up to Fire Emblem 8 of Sacred Stones. You would use these items that I can't remember exactly what they're called off the top of my head for some odd reason, but you would use these items, and they vary depending on the character's classes and such. And then there's the ones for all classes at all. But you use these items to change the character's class, and it will automatically go to certain classes on certain. If you're, say, like I said, a Great Lord, a Lord, then you'll upgrade to a Great Lord. That was how it was through Fire Emblem 1 up through 7. In Fire Emblem 8, they introduced branching classes, where when you use the item, you can choose between 2 different classes that are upgraded versions of whatever they had. Like, say you upgrade your knight, they can either become a general or a great knight. And those 2 classes play radically different, so you do need to really pay attention to your own choices. And certain characters are better as certain classes, so it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of really careful planning going on, and it's more so than most tactics games, ironically. But still, It's a surprisingly well done system, and that was one of the two major changes between this and Fire Emblem 7 in terms of the gameplay. The other being the strategic map. Whenever you complete a battle, you will go to the strategic map, and not necessarily. Some of them are a little forced, but that's only early on. You'll get to this main map, and you will actually have to choose where you want to go on the map. Say you might only have one location, that's where your next battle is going to be. So you go there and you do the battle, and you, if you say win it, or even if you lose it, I guess. If you win it, then you actually can go off onto another place, or you can kind of hang back and purchase new equipment and such. You will be purchasing a lot of equipment in this game, because each item has limited uses. Even weapons. I mean, you have a certain number of attacks you can do, at least hits, I mean, before your weapon breaks. And that can be pretty problematic, especially if you get later on in the game, where you're fighting a lot of enemies at once, and your weapons just keep breaking over and over again. Now, I mean, experienced Fire Emblem players will have no problem with that, but if you're new to the series, then you'll probably have a big problem with that early on, until you get used to it. You can also, in Fire Emblem 8, do skirmishes, which are battles against just random monsters and such, to gain experience points, but you do have to be careful, because your characters can still die in this too. So you really have to pay attention to what you're doing. You have to be really careful who you put on the field. And it's advisable to have the weaker characters just kind of finish off enemies rather than actually go after them. Have your more powerful characters soften them up and such. So it's an interesting system, and it works surprisingly well. I mean, you have lots of different varied classes. You have lots of unique characters. You have a fairly good storyline. It's not great, but it's fairly good. And it's really challenging. That's all things that would be great in a game. But still, late on in the game, it really loses steam. I mean, early on, it's kind of slow. Mid, it picks up. At the end of the game, it's just kind of like the train that's moving along just suddenly rams into a brick wall or something. I mean, it's kind of weird the way it ends. It's just kind of like, wait, that was it? So, it has a kind of a disappointing ending, but it's really not that bad in terms of disappointing endings. So, overall, Fire Emblem Sacred Stones is a very solid game that's well worth playing for any tactics fan, and especially tactical RPG fans. So, I highly recommend it. 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching.